you so much, Marah. Nice to see everybody. Shabbat Shalom. And we are going to start with a chant, just to kind of bring us present. I put it in the chat, but I'm going to put it here again. Um, Here's the source sheet. Hold on, just posting something. And the chant comes from the Song of the Sea. And that is, this Shabbat is called Shabbat Shirah because we're celebrating moving through from Egypt into our freedom. We're moving out of that place of constriction, which is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is the Hebrew word for Egypt, but the root of the word for ancient Egypt and also modern Egypt, but it's from the biblical story, is Metzar, to be in that narrow place. So what does it feel like to move through that narrow place into a place of spaciousness, into openness, and from the constriction of Egypt, of being slaves and moving through the sea, experiencing the miracle of the parting of the sea and going to on the other side and looking back and saying, we are not there anymore. So placing ourselves right on the other side of the shore, we can look back and sing a beautiful chant, that the setting that is Rabbi Sheffa Gold's Ozi v'zimratya vayehili lishua, that God is my strength, God is my song, God will be my salvation. I put the words in the chat. You can join with me or just hum along, but it goes like this. Ozi v'zimratya vayehili lishua. Ozi v'zimratya vayehili lishua. Ozi v'zimratya vayehili lishua. Ozi v'zimratya vayehili lishua. Those words are from Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea. And so I share that with you today as a beginning point of opening, of singing, of joyousness as we now move through our text study. I'm going to share my screen with you so we can look at the sources together. Vayosha Adonai bayom hahu et Yisrael miad Mitzrayim, vayar Yisrael et Mitzrayim meit al sfat hayam. God delivered Israel that day from the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea. And then verse 31, Vayar Yisrael et hayad hagdola asher asa Adonai b'Mitzrayim, vayir'u ha'am et Adonai, vayaminu b'Adonai u'v'Moshe avdo. And then when Israel saw the wondrous power that God had wielded against the Egyptians, the people feared God. They had faith in Moses. They had faith in God. They had faith in God and in Moses, God's servant, right? Ultimate statement of faith. Clear and deep emuna. And why not, right? They just experienced the 10 plagues. They just experienced the crossing of the sea, right? There's nothing that, right? There's no doubt. There is just no doubt, right? That what they saw with their own eyes, right, transpired for them. Okay. And then it goes on even, there's a focus on the women, right? On the deep amuna of the women. Vatikach Miriam hanevia, achot Aharon, et hatof biada, vatetzaena kol hanashim achareh betupim ubemachalot. And then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, picked up her hand drum, and all of the women went out after her in dance with drums, with timbrels. Okay, so classic question: where did the women? They're coming out of Egypt, right? Right? They're racing out of Egypt, right? They're racing out of Egypt. They don't even have time to let the bread rise, right? They're grabbing, the children. They're grabbing the most important things. They're grabbing food. They're putting on their back and they're hightailing it. They're getting out of Egypt. and they're taking drums and timbrels. So Rashi asks the question, where do they get the instruments from? Like, how did that become so important? So Rashi, quoting the Midrash, the righteous women of that generation were confident that God would perform miracles for them. And so they accordingly had brought timbrels with them from Egypt. Right? So deep faith we're talking about, unwavering faith that the people had. Maybe it took them all the way to the moment of the crossing of the sea, but it was clear that the women already had the faith. They already knew, right? They unquestionable kind of faith that they knew that they would be celebrating miracles that would be taking place for them, right, in this experience of the crossing of the sea. So we move from this place, and this is really what this text study is about today, a movement from faith to doubt. But doubt is really with a question mark. So if I were to kind of put that in another way, from faith to doubt, right? Maybe because when we look at the sources that look like doubt, they look like they have that the Israelites have doubt in God, right? Immediately after the experience of the crossing of the sea, right? It looks very problematic. It's questionable. Like, what's up with the Israelites, right? That they just left Egypt. All of these miracles performed for them. They clearly said they believe wholeheartedly in God. They believe wholeheartedly in Moses as God's servant. Like, they know what they saw. They know what they experienced. And then immediately they complain that there's no water. Immediately they complain that there's no food or that they don't like the food. Like, what is happening to their faith? And the question we're asking, is the issue that they're having wavering faith? Is doubt creeping in, or something else going on? And it's the something else that's going on that really interested me today and that I wanted to share with you. But we're going to do a deep dive along the way into two passages, definitely into the first one, and we'll see how much time we have for the second one. Number one, to explore what happens immediately after they leave the sea. And they go on their way, and what are the questions that they ask, and what's going on there with the incident of Marah, this place called Marah. Okay. So here, just for ease, you can follow. You could open up your own Chumash, by the way, if you're having trouble seeing the screen, and you can look at it on your own there too in a book. So Moses, so Vayisa Moshe Yisrael. So I want you to pay attention to language here, okay? Look at the verbs and look at the adjectives as well. Vayisa Moshe Yisrael miyam suf. So Moses moved them. All right, take a look at that, right? So the people are, they're at the sea. They're apparently like 600,000 of them. Not so easy to move, right? But so he moves them. Maybe they didn't want to, maybe they're like a bit stuck there. Maybe it was hard to move that from that place of the miracle, right? So keeping that in mind, what was it like to move from the shore of the Yam Suf on the other side? What was it like for them to move on from that place? So maybe like just intuiting that question, right? The Bible gives us the answer, Vayisa. Vayisa Moshe Yisrael miyam suf, that God moves them from the Yam Suf, not God, Moses. And Vayitzu el midbar shor. So they go to this place, midbar shor, and then what happens? Vayelchu shlosha yamim bamidbar velo mata'u mayim. They walk for 3 days and they don't find water. All right? Fair enough. What happens next? Fair enough. We're going to see, right? They're walking for 3 days and they don't have water. Maybe they don't need water. They're on a spiritual high, but like, we all need water, right? And they haven't found it. So they get to this place called Vayavo Marata. They come to a place they go into, which look at that word too. Vayavo'u, they come into, right? A place of Marata. Is it a spiritual orientation, Marata? Is it, how they physically feel? Marah is bitter. It means bitter. So they come into bitterness, right? They come to like literally a place called bitterness. But that could be a state of mind. That could be, it could be, an emotional stance. Like they're bitter, they were moved from the place of miracle, right? Then they were dragged, 3 days with no water. And how are they feeling at this point? So it's like almost like that bibliodrama. You could put yourself in that place. And I'm going to take us through, just as an aside, I'm going to take us through these texts. So when I ask you a question, they're thought questions, but consider jotting down like, what's awakening for you, because we're going to move on, but we can come back to these questions a little bit later, okay? So they come to this place called Marata, velo yachlu lishtot mayim mimara, ki marim heim. Alkain kara shemo Marah. Look how many times. 4 times in one verse, right? That this word bitterness. They come to this place called bitterness. They couldn't drink the water because it was bitter. They were bitter, right? In this place, the waters were bitter. Therefore, the place was called another bold. I can't bold it because it's not my sheet now because Mara has it. Mara, and it has a different meaning too. That name. So Mara, this place was bitter. So what happens? All right. So bitterness of a state of mind, bitterness because the water itself is actually unpotable, right? They can't drink it. So what happens? So they complain, right? Some people say they murmur. It's like a very interesting word that a lot of the commentators pick up on, like, what kind of word is this? But like yalinu, it's like it's externalized. It's not just under their breath. Like it's all Moshe, right? So they're bringing this complaint to Moses, right? On Moses, right? And who is it? It's the okay? Like everybody, is it everybody? Is it not the righteous people? Like enough people see this place, Marah, as a problem, right? Or the mindset that they have in this place is problematic, that they complain and then they say, Manishte, what are we going to drink? Right? They're not going berserk, by the way, right? They're simply asking, what will we drink? Valid and fair question. So Vayitzakel Adonai. So Moses presumably cries out to God. And now check out what happens next. So Mara, if you can move the sheet up, please, so we can see what's next. I'm just keeping part of that there. Yeah, okay. So Vayitzak, so Moses cries out, and then God does something interesting. Vayashlech, God, shows him. God shows Moses, right? The word that is used there, like instructs Moses, vayarehu, it says he shows him, he instructs him. But right, vayorehu is the word. So God is showing Moses, instructing Moses about what? A tree. Okay, there's a tree. Vayashlech el hamayim. So Moses takes that tree and throws it into the water. Vayimteku hamayim, and the water is sweetened. And so therefore, there's a fixed rule that was made for them, and they were put to a test. Okay, so we'll get back to that test in a moment. Okay, and then what happens next? God says, if you will heed the eternal your God diligently, doing what is upright in my sight, giving ear to my commandments and keeping all my laws. This sounds very Deuteronomic, by the way. They just came out of, we're in the Exodus, right? But they just came out and they're already reiterating the law, the Torah, like they didn't even receive it yet, right? By the way. But God is testing them to see this relationship that they are in with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? And God says, if you follow these laws, right? If you follow these commands, I won't bring upon you any of the diseases that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am God, your healer. Ani Adonai Rofecha. Such a beautiful statement. But let's take a look at what is this tree? How does it function? What is God actually showing Moses? How does the tree sweeten the waters? Right? What's really going on here? So several different midrashim offer several conjectures regarding the kind of tree that could sweeten this particular water. And I'll share with you that I found this in a collection called Otzrot Pelot HaTorah, where he brings the Zev Zecherman brings in like all kinds of plos, like plot, very like wonderful, interesting, like off the beaten track kind of insights into the Torah portion. So he offers like a compilation from various midrashim. What was the tree that sweetened the water? So we have some ideas. Number one, it could have been the olive tree, which we all know if you've ever tried a olive before it's cured, right? Very better. Maybe it was a willow tree. That would make sense. Roots of a fig or pomegranate. Oleander is offered, which is poisonous to animals, harmful to people, but it's also considered to be an antidote for snake poisoning. I didn't research that, okay? I got that from the Otzrot Pelot HaTorah. So take my word for it, or you can look it up yourself. Some say that it's the lote tree, a woody shrub that is native to the Mediterranean region that thrives near springs. Maybe it's a gopher tree. Remember the gopher tree that was used to create the ark and the Noah story? Cardamom, which is a hardy tree that grows on Mount Ararat, so like from Turkey. Or if you didn't think it was any of those, it could have been the tree of life, the Eitz Chaim from the Garden of Eden that God threw it to Moses. All right, it says by Yarehu, he like threw it, not just showed him or instructed him, but threw it to Moses, and then Moses throws it in the water, and then that particular tree or piece of the tree was used throughout the wandering in the desert to create healing waters for people who were sick to drink, and they would get better. They would be healed if they drink that. Or, or maybe it wasn't a tree at all in the, like a real tree. Maybe it wasn't a physical tree. Rather, it was God showed Moses the Torah. Because what is the Torah? The tree of life. The tree of life. Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba, right? Or Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba. A tree of life, which is the Torah. God showed Moses the way in which the Torah can sweeten the bitter waters. I love that. And you can look at it this way as well. Eitz is the Hebrew word for tree, but what is good advice? Eitzah, Eitzah. So God here is using this tree, right, as a demonstration, whether it's Torah, as a teaching, or showing Moses like these particular options that you have available to you to help the people in this moment. All of it is in the fashion of like a teacher or a parent instructing on how to respond, right, in a particular situation when you're under duress, right? Don't panic. Don't run away. Don't push back, right? Acknowledge the people are suffering. Acknowledge that they are thirsty. And from that place of clarity of mind, of understanding the situation you're in, God is saying to Moses, as a teacher, right? See what resources are available to you and respond in turn. Okay. Whether it's seeing like, what is the tree in front of me that could help me in this situation, right? Or is it that, what resources do you have available to you to be present, right, with the suffering of those who are before you? How can you help them, right, without pushing them away or belittling them? Right. So all of that can come out of just this one line of God showed him this tree, right? And then Moses throws it in the water and sweetens the bitter waters. So the sweetening of the water here, you can say it's another miracle, right? And it is. But it's a way of being in the world. It's a way of being in the world. So let's take a look at another perspective, which is maybe the bitter waters, and this comes from the Zohar, because it says here, right, it was a test. The situation was a test. So this is a bit, I think it's a little bit playful, and I'm bringing it for just like kind of a totally, like now for something completely different, okay? So what was going on here with the tree? So this comes from the Zohar, that sorry. Because I think did we skip something on mine or no? Okay, I'm just going to take a look at yours. No, you're fine. You're fine. Let's go back there at all. Let's go back there. Okay. So here's what the Zohar says. What is this water that was mentioned here? This bitter waters. So where else do we have bitter waters that you know of? Right in the book of Numbers, the Sota ritual of the unfaithful, like the test, right? It's not for it isn't an unfaithful wife, but it's a test. If somebody, a husband is suspicious, I guess. So what was the suspicion here? Why would these waters be used in this way? So the Egyptians claimed to be the parents of the children of Israel, and many among the Israelites suspected their wives in this matter. So the Holy One, blessed be he, brought them to the Marah, this place of Marah, to put them to the test. So let's go down further. So when Moses cried to God, God gave him an answer and said, write down the divine name, cast it into the water, and let all of them, everybody here, women and men, be tested so that there will be no evil report about my children, right? They'll all be probed, and my name will be caused to rest on them when you see that everybody here, right, is a-okay. So the Lord showed him the tree, and he cast it into the waters, and because this tree was identical with the divine name. Okay, so the tree was actually the divine name. So it's another piece of, I guess, ephemera we could add to this. That the priest, sorry, that Moses threw into the water, and so it proved that everybody was pure, everybody was holy, and everyone literally passed the test. And so the Shekhinah, the divine presence, could dwell, in fact, on the people Israel. Okay, we're going to take that or leave it. Let's move up to the next piece. So there's something interesting about this tree as well, about Marah. Every tree that was mentioned, except for maybe like the tree of life that was mentioned there, they're all kind of like a bitter and a hardy tree. So there's a midrash that says how different are the ways of the Kadosh Baruch Hu from the ways of people. Why? People, will sweeten the bitter with sweetness, right? If you have like a bitter tea, you're gonna put like sugar in it, right? Or honey. No, I see Jen, they're saying no. So you're going to maybe some people will put a sweetener in, right? Some people like the bitterness, right? But if you want to sweeten something up, we know how to do it. You can put something sweet and it will, right, sweeten. But that is not the case with God. God sweetens the bitter with bitter. How so? He places the thing that can harm, right? Could be poisonous trees, right? And he puts that in the water and in that way performs a miracle of bitter on top of bitter can create a transformative experience. So let's see what Rabbi Jonathan Sacks says about that. This is in his new commentary, or it came out after he died, of the Magerman edition of the Koren Chumash. He says, we often seek to cure suffering through distraction and denial, right? That we can not be suffering, right, if we just do something else, like scroll on our phones or I don't know, like not think about it, change the subject. But God is saying that's not the answer, right? Marah is going to come up a lot, right? There are going to be difficult times. And how will you go through these difficult times, right? God is saying pain, I'm going back to the source now, pain and loneliness are forms of energy that can be transferred if we turn them, you're right there, I'm reading it, Marah, sorry. Yeah, this paragraph where it says Jonathan Sacks, right? Pain and loneliness are forms of energy that can be transferred if we turn them outward, using them to recognize and redeem someone else's pain and loneliness, to heal where others harm, mend where others destroy, to redeem evil by turning its negative energies to good. These are the marks of the ethics of responsibility, born in the radical faith that God calls on us to exercise our freedom by becoming his partners in the work of creation. So you can spend more time to unpack that, right? But one takeaway from this, right, is to reiterate something that, we've already kind of explored here, is that sometimes you sit with the bitterness. Sometimes the antidote to bitterness is to be in it in order to transform it. And that's the genius of what God is showing Moses, and that's the test in this place. Can we be uncomfortable? Right? If some of you out there are meditators, right, and a mindfulness practice, sometimes you have to move through the discomfort in order to eventually feel, right, the greater experience of expansion and spaciousness, right? And that is what God is demonstrating here. It's a test. It's a test. Can you sit with the discomfort, right, in order to recognize it and see it what it is, see it for what it is, and then figure out a way, right, gently and in a transformative way, right, to move this pain into something redemptive, into healing waters, right? God says, I am the God, your healer, okay? Your healer. And even, a sweetness. So now let's move on. Let's see what happens next. The first Yeah, we already talked about the spiritual condition of Marah. Okay, keep going. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. Okay, from thirst to quench. Immediately after this experience, all right, of this test, of this showing of the way, they come to a place of spaciousness, right? They were able to sit through that discomfort. They were able to talk about it. They were able to pray on it. They were able to see their way through. And now they're at Elim. And what happens at Elim? It's a mirage. There's 12 springs of water, 70 palm trees, right? Commentators say that that's these are stock numbers, right, to show that there was plenty of water to drink, plenty of food. Everyone was okay, right, for a few minutes. All right, now let's go on next. We figured out the thirst, but what about hunger? What are they hungering for? What are they hungering for? All right, God shows them how to deal with their thirst, but how do you deal with their hunger? And what was the nature of their hunger? Right, because here's what happens next in the Torah. So in the wilderness, what happens next? Verse 2, Exodus 16, 2 through 6. Vayalinu kol adat b'nei Yisrael al Moshe ve'al Aharon b'midbar. Now they are complaining again. And what are they complaining about? Vayomru aleihem b'nei Yisrael, mi yitein mutenu biyad Adonai be'eretz Mitzrayim, bishvitenu al sir abasar be'achlenu lachem lizba, ki yotzeitem otanu al midbar azeh lahamit et kol hakahal azeh bara'av. Why did you take us out of Egypt? You could have killed, we could have died in Egypt, right? You took us out. If only we had died. If only we had died by God's hand in the land of Egypt. Why? What were we doing? We were eating. We were satiated. We were sitting by the flesh pot. Flesh pots? Yeah. Like big cauldrons of meat, that we were eating our fill. We were eating our bread. And you brought us out of there to starve in this wilderness, all of your congregation to starve in the wilderness. Let's unpack that for a second. What were they eating? Right? We can stay right here. Just to like think about this for a second. What are they remembering or misremembering? They were slaves in Egypt. Do we really imagine that they were eating tons of meat all the time? Like one of the commentators says, well, many of them served as, like servants in the houses of the Egyptians, and maybe the Egyptians were eating meat and they were literally sitting next to, it says here, doesn't say in this verse they were eating these flesh pots. That's just a funny thing to say, right? Doesn't say we were eating all this meat. It says they were sitting next to the meat, almost like an expectation in their mind's eye and like in their memory that they could eat it, or like picturing this is what a free person does. They eat meat, all as much as they want of it. And they just like sort of remember themselves salivating and thinking about themselves as being free people. And now that they're free, where's the meat, right? Where are these big pots of meat that they were expecting to be eating, as free people? So it's kind of like an interesting sort of mismemory or like placed memory of an expectation they had that now that they were free people. The other question you could ask, which the commentators asked, was like, we know they came out with all of their son and bakar, they had all of this cattle. Could they not have just taken some of that and like had a little barbecue, by the fire at Elim? Like, what's the problem here? You got food, or you have animals, you have currency, you can maybe take one or two of them. And I'm not saying this to upset any vegetarians out there, just saying they want meat. They seem to have the means to do that at their disposal. So something else must be going on here. And what is it? So God responds, and let's see God's response. And then we're going to look at a Hasidic teaching. And then hopefully we'll have time after that to sort of unpack some of this together with your questions and reflections. So God responds. All right, verse 4. And God said to Moshe, interesting word here, but hineni, like here I am. All right, that's a word of like I am present, right? What do the ancestors say, the avots, when God calls them? Each of them say, hineni, I am here. So I want you to look at that word and think about that for a second. That God is, you'll see the answer looks maybe angry, but let's read it in a way that maybe has some like a flip side too, right? I'm here, God is saying, hineni, right? And what am I going to do? Mamtir lachem lechem. Mamtir has had in the past some negative connotation. I'm going to rain down on you from the sky, right? This bread, or not, yeah, lechem min hashamayim, bread from the sky. So what is this? mamtir, it was used twice already in the book of Genesis, something negative, like Sodom and Gomorrah, and the flood, like torrential and like an angry kind of, rain. But it could also be like tain tal matar. Like matar is a type of rain that's, steady, it's constant, it's refreshing, it's life-giving, right? So it could go either way here. So God is going to give this like life, provide life-giving kind of lechem min hashamayim. So we can get bread from the sky. It's like sounds pretty interesting. But what kind of bread is it? That's what they're learning here. It's going to be the man. And part of the God's answer here is I'm not letting you go. All right. I'm not just you're asking me for food, I'm giving you food. Even the food that rains from the sky is part of a test of fidelity, a test of emunah, of faith, a test of a continuing interest in being in relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That is the place from which God responds to the people, right? It's not like a child saying, give me food, and God answers, here it is. It's an orientation. The answer that God provides is a response that demands that the people continue to be in relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? In that covenantal type of way. I'm going to do this for you because I love you, and hineni, I am here for you, but you will still have a part. You have an obligation on your part, right? We know a few verses above that we just read. Your part has to do with paying attention, staying within the guardrails of Torah, right, that have been already instructed, that are being shown to you, like through the Eitz Chaim and so forth. All right, so let's go down. And the test is that they go down every day, right? They get the manna, right? On Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, like today. Good Shabbos, everybody. Did you go out and get your double portion of manna yet? Hopefully you did, right? That we have our double portion, and so that we trust that even on Shabbat, when we're not going to go out and collect, that like our manna will still be, edible, and it will still be satisfying and delicious, right? This is the test of the manna. All right, so let's go out further. So at face value, we'll consider this question, what does anything, and hold on to the question because we'll talk about it hopefully in a minute or so. There's still, um, you know, some of you might be still holding this question, like they're so ungrateful. Like, how is it that they moved from Yetziat Mitzrayim to a place of like clear faith to a place of doubt? Why are they arguing? Why are they asking for food? Why are they asking for water? Why are they complaining in a way that sounds pretty obscene, like a complete lack of faith? And where is that coming from? So I want to answer that question. Sfat emet, right? And this is the last piece that we'll look at, the Sfat emet. So the Rebbe, the Sfat emet, Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Leib Alter, he asks this question on this verse here. Are they hungering for something physical or spiritual? All right, and it's a Hasidic teaching, so you already know the answer. Okay, so the rabbi asks, what is this craving about? And he says, it seems that the explanation of the hunger for food is that they experienced a different kind of hunger, one that cannot be satisfied with earthly bread, right? They're going to get bread from heaven, as is said in the future. And he pulls a verse from Amos that God declares, when I will send a famine upon the land, not a hunger for bread or a thirst for water, but for hearing the word of God. So it seems like at this moment, right after Elim, as they continue on, that they're not just thirsting for regular water. They're not just hungry for regular bread. They want to be feel a closeness with the divine. All right, so moving on further in this commentary, they desired, I'm just going to excerpt here, that they desired a God who would feed them day in and day out. When God says, I will rain bread from you from the sky, God is saying, yes, I will be there for you. Yes, I understand that what you need from heaven now is not grand wizardry, not rather routine maintenance. And in place of a once-in-a-lifetime display, I will now show my love in daily acts of nourishment, because God is Hazan et Hakol, the one who feeds and sustains all. So a little bit further. God responds to them because, in accord with this hunger, they were prepared to receive the bread from heaven, right? Each of them, came out of Egypt. Each of them has this individual with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And God is paying attention to each and every one of their individual needs. All right, so one last piece. This is still on the spot, Emmett, so I didn't lie to you. It's just still on this theme. So to bring this idea to a conclusion now, what was the hunger and why did they have it? It wasn't a hunger for bread, but a hearing for the word of God. Why? Because after the sea, the Israelites were spiritually over awakened, right? Their internal capacity had expanded beyond the material plane, right? The craving they had wasn't for Egyptian food. It was a craving for continued revelation and closeness with God. Right. So what was the complaint? Maybe it looks like a real complaint for food and water, but the Sfat Emet is suggesting that the complaint maybe it's a misaligned request for nourishment. They're still figuring themselves out as free people, and they're still figuring out how to be in relationship with God. Right. And so this closing here. And so manna is a perfect sort of answer. Why? Because it's unstorable, it's directly dependent on God, and it shows that they don't have a generic hunger, but a hunger for the Kadosh Baruch Hu. God does not feed people objectively, but He's feeding them relationally. And I'll leave you with this question here, which is to instead of thinking about their vacillation of faith to doubt, maybe what's really happening is they're asking, how could finite human beings metabolize infinite revelation? So that's what I leave you with as we go into some last few minutes together to process that each of us, is still in relationship with God. This Shabbat of Shabbat Shirah, where we read the Song of the Sea collectively from the Torah, we're also reminded we read this passage every single day in our morning prayers, right? We never really leave that place of Yetziat Mitzrayim. We're always called to go back to that place, right? And we're always called to go back to that moment of majesty, right? Of those big miracles, but also called to remember what happened after that, which was the daily sustenance and the desire, right, to continue to be close with the divine. Okay, so some questions. Marah, can you help me with
Yes.
this?
Thank you so much for your teaching and for your singing. Julius, I see your hand, but I'm just going to call on Susie first because she had her hand up earlier. But then we'll come to you.
Okay.
No, thank you. I put it in the chat and it was for that one specific sentence. I related a psalm to the test. I test you by the waters of the oasis. So
Okay. Thank
that's
you for
all it
using the
was.
chat. Here you go, ooh, Julius.
How can I say this? This whole teaching is beautiful, and I can definitely relate to it. God meeting our needs physically and spiritually. I mean, the manna and how God met their needs. He really cares about us. That's how I see this whole Torah portion, even in the little things that we do. That's all.
Thank you. Um, I okay, great. Thank you, Cheryl. And I don't know if David Feldman is still here, but I see you. I appreciate your comment of sorry, don't buy it. And if you're willing, we can call on you. I would love to hear more about what you mean by that.
So I appreciate Svat Emet and his idea that it's a search for spiritual food. But I think at this point, the Israelites are really feeling uncomfortable, and they just want to know that they can count on having literal food and water guaranteed. And maybe they would like some spiritual support also. But I think it's a literal, we want to know that we can count on having some food and water. You know, we all, back in Egypt, maybe they didn't have meat all the time as they're groaning about, but at least they knew that they were going to have food. And out in the desert, they don't know that yet.
Yep.
Thank you. David, I'm going to ask you to unmute, but you can totally say no. But I'd love to hear what you were thinking. Oops, sorry, you're still muted.
Mute.
Okay, great. We
I
can hear.
thought the last Parsha we had a problem because the Israelites had a slave mentality. They didn't want to leave. They didn't want to take a chance. Okay. And I basically still think that they have a slave mentality. Last week I had wondered, what does God have to do to prove he's so powerful? He keeps hardening Pharaoh's heart, not for Pharaoh, but for this slave mentality that the Israelites have. And it really ticked me off that little line about the wives. What did they think? Their wives were unfaithful with the Egyptians? Blame the women? You
Thank you,
know,
David.
and now I understand from the text, I don't understand, but I appreciate the text. It's the commentary that makes me angry.
Thank
Okay.
you. Rabbi, would you like to respond, or should we hear from some of our other hands?
Oh, well, just a quick response. When I started the process of putting this Torah study together, as Marah asked me, several weeks ago, I was just going to look at, what's going on with the Israelites? Why are they so, what's, like human nature, right, is simply going to be the answer, like they had experienced God and the closest that they could be to God. And then, they're immediately complaining, like, what is it about human nature that causes us to complain and have that inability to see or to lose faith so quickly? And from that starting point, I opened up into the commentaries and found a completely new direction. So it's not like, it's almost like Torah is choose your own adventure. If you, you go down a rabbit hole and sometimes you find a really different one, an interesting one, and it may be where you are this year. But when you look at the same text next year, you'll find completely different commentaries that speak to you in that time. So that's what happened to me. I wasn't looking for these texts, these commentaries. They appeared, and I went with them for you guys as a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of fun in some places, and maybe a little bit of a tree education in case you needed that. Okay.
In time for Tu B'Shvat.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we are at time, and it is so painful to see so many hands, which is how you know that these texts and the commentary you brought inspired questions and thoughts. Please feel free to share them. You can send me an email, and I can share anything with Rabbi Danielle. But in our final moments together, Rabbi, if you could leave us with a closing intention, a bracha, maybe a song if you'd like, before we head into Shabbat.
Mhm. My blessing for us is that we be like the Tzidkaniot, the righteous women of that generation, who, while they were in the darkest place of Egypt, still had the faith to believe that one day they would have a reason to celebrate. And they prepared by bringing with them their tambourines and their drums. May we all be able to dig into our own spiritual resources, and to maintain those important relationships with one another and with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, to always know that we will see our way through and God will show us the way through, so that we will all be on the other side to celebrate together in wholeness, in healing, and with great emunah and great connection. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Bye bye.